Welcome, everybody, to the first of our 3 interviews with the finalists for the superintendent's position for the Danvers Public Schools. And I want to thank everyone for being here. Thanks to those of you taking the time to come down tonight. As many of you know, this is not being broadcast live, sort of as a way to keep the integrity of the process so that every candidate we interview will be hearing the questions for the first time. So let's begin, as we always do, with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have with us today one of our finalists, Peter Cushing. Welcome, Peter. I know you've had a busy day in the district, and I hope you had an interesting and lively time here. So I'm going to turn it over to Robin at the moment. This will be a 60-minute interview. Robin, if you'd like to introduce our candidate, and we can get started.
Sure. So this is Dr. Peter Cushing. He is currently, and I'm going to Assistant Superintendent, give me the whole thing, of Innovation.
And Enrichment.
And Enrichment, thank you, at the Medford Public Schools. So he obviously is one of our 3 finalists. He visited the district today at DHS. He had meetings at central office with the principals, Smith School, Riverside, Holton Richmond. And then you had meetings with the DTA leadership, the teachers and the staff, and then you had 2 community meet and greets for anyone here. So this is his, final interview tonight. So what's going to happen is you'll have an opening statement. We each have 2 questions, so there'll be 10 questions in total. And then you'll have an opportunity for closing statement and any questions. And similar to before, if we ask a question, then we have a follow-up. And any of us, so like if it's Alice's question, but any of you have a follow-up to that, any of us can ask that. So just so you know. And for the community, thank you for coming. Any of you who are here tonight, or if you have met Dr. Cushing at any time, there is a Google form that has been posted all over social media that we are asking. It's anonymous for you to give us feedback. It will be due, all the forms will be due on Monday by 5 p.m. so that we have time to look at it prior to the last interview. And you want to fill out one for each candidate that you meet. So,
all right, so just by way of sort of housekeeping, we'll do the interview, and then if we could stay, we'll let Peter go, and then if we can stay in session here for probably 15 minutes or so, maybe 20 minutes, we can talk about the process and what it'll look like going forward since we're all together.
Yep.
All right, so with that, Peter, I believe it's time for you, I'm sorry, Dr. Cushing, it is time for you to give us an opening statement.
So, Mr. Crane, thank you very much, and by all means, Peter works totally fine. I really want to thank the members of the Danvers Public Schools, you, the 5 members of the Danvers School Committee, the teachers that I met today, the students, the custodians who do an impeccable job keeping the members of the DPW who do an impeccable job keeping these schools clean. I don't think I've ever been in cleaner schools. They really are amazing. I want to thank all the lunch ladies and lunch staff that I met at the Holton Richmond School in particular, and all the secretaries and administrative assistants, and basically everybody throughout this district who welcomed me with open arms today. It was really an amazing day. I am inspired by this opportunity to be a part of the Danvers Public Schools, to collaboratively help lead Danvers through to the future. And I'm a firm believer, as I've said numerous times today, to members of the community, to Mary Wormers, who did an amazing job taking me around today, and I loved learning from her as well. I am truly inspired by the opportunities that we have in Danvers to make this the flagship school not only of Massachusetts, of the North Shore, but of all of Massachusetts. That the programs and opportunities and things that I saw today with your faculty, staff, and students, educators across the board, this is a tremendous opportunity. The strengths that I saw in your teaching core, and that goes beyond just teachers, your instructional aides, the people who invest in your students on a daily basis, was truly something to be seen. I saw good instructional practice in walking through classrooms with agendas and what students should be able to do and other classroom things that are really imperative for our students to be successful. So there are no surprises in their learning. I saw active learning at Holt Richmond as students were literally sprinting up and down the halls, getting their heart rates elevated. I saw students working in collaborative pairs at the Smith Elementary School outside their classrooms, and was really inspired. I'm someone who believes in leading by the North Star of my core values, the most cornerstone of which is being actively anti-racist, and making sure also that I'm a clear communicator, that I'm 100% transparent, almost to the point of, as one of the former American generals said, criminality, like being transparent with the community and being transparent with all stakeholders. It's really fundamentally critical. And then building trust. And I believe that I build trust by being present at student events, staff events, community events. It's been a hallmark of who I am. And once again, I just want to say how humbled I am to be here before you and to be here before the Danvers community this evening, because I am really excited for this opportunity.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So I have your first question. I'm happy that you spoke about your walkthrough, because that's actually the question that I have for you. Could you describe our school district, what you saw today in the schools, meeting the staff, the administrative teachers, et cetera, and then tell us a little bit about what you see as the opportunities that you spoke about and some of the challenges that you think we're facing?
So I think that I think I'll just go back to the walkthrough real quick. I started my day with the central office leadership staff, and there was a true sense of community that came through there. That when I asked them what inspired them or what did they love most about the Danvers Public Schools, they said, these people we're with. And I think that that is a fundamentally critical element of building a great school district. People who want to be here. Going in and talking to the literacy coach and meeting other curriculum specialists throughout the day, they showed a real passion for their work with Hill for Literacy. They showed a real passion for the things that they were doing, and you could see it in the artifacts that were hanging on the walls, that I was able to read various things that really showed how the district is working to make sure that they're staying on target, that they're doing the best they can to really raise the bar for their students. And I think those are some of the really critical things. When you walk around the schools with Mr. Federico and the other principals that I was with today, that they know students' names, that they're engaging them on names. When you see a student at Riverside School, sorry, it's been a long day. When you see a student at Riverside School that, you know, she's running down the hall with a big smile on her face, and her name's Sophia, and she's basically the mayor of Riverside. And she's an amazing little student that's just really brought a big smile to my face. And meeting students and, you know, starting to go to get to know their names. And that's something that I saw throughout this entire district today. Talking with teachers that they really want to see someone come in to build trust. They want someone who's going to be a partner to build trust. And I'll be honest, I think that's who I am. I think if you reach out to people that I've worked with in the past, through Narragansett and Bartlett High School and Medford, that people believe that when I talk to them, I'm not giving them doublespeak, I'm engaging them with humanity, and that I'm also listening. And by listening and acting, you build genuine trust. And you can really repair any rifts you have. It'll take time, but those are the things that we can do and we can achieve. So how would I describe your school district? Awesome. Really phenomenal. People don't understand, as I may have mentioned to many of you on the side, I've watched every single school committee meeting since last February for sure, and then I mixed in January. And I've seen people get up to the microphone and speak. You have an amazing school district, and I got to see the first glimpses of that today. You have a school district where students should be absolutely 100% proud to be in these classrooms learning from these educators, and that we can move forward. So the opportunities and the challenges. There are great opportunities for our students at this high school and in our middle school to go through some great exploratory programs, some great core classes that have good technical expertise from teachers, and the tools to make that real. Beautiful buildings, that you've embraced the challenge head-on of really tackling diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the fact that in the materials that are printed, belonging is such a cornerstone part of what this district wants to be. I firmly believe that you have to create a sense of belonging, and then students buy in. When you know students' names, as your principals do, when you know kids, who their brothers and sisters are, what their challenges are, what they might be facing at home, you're better situated as a leader to help support them and then help support their academic outcomes. The challenges that I see you face is largely a marketing and communications problem, that a comprehensive marketing and strategy plan is there. I've done my research. I've heard on the school committees about the concerns about students leaving for other schools. All right? Public schools do great work that you don't have to pay tens of thousands of dollars a year to get elsewhere. And you can also get great education without having to go down the road for vocational technical. All right? And so those challenges, we need to really let our students know by having tour days here, by having marketing materials go home, by having conversations with parents, inviting them into the school en masse, and not just inviting them into the school, but by going to community events. One of the things that I used to love doing as a principal was going to the local craft fair and setting up a school tent where I could engage with parents. I could help them with reading materials or math materials, or we could engage them in like, well, has your child ever considered an advanced placement course? We can cover your fee for you if you need for the test, and various things along those lines. So I see those as some really great opportunities for Danvers to tackle. And you know, the challenges, it's more than just marketing and communications, but it's really building a sense of positivity and rebuilding trust. When teachers bring up an issue of trust, that's something you've got to really tackle head on. And if it's not real, but it's people's perception, perception is reality. And you've got to really build a strong culture that will help support all of your strategic initiatives.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next question is from Josh.
All right. Thanks, Peter. What metrics would you use to determine the success of a school district? So that's the first part of the question. And the second part is, what would you change or improve to make Danvers a top-tier district? You mentioned that in your opening.
I think one of the things that you really have to look at, so there are several metrics. One, I think you need to look at your attrition rate, all right? Making sure that you're keeping your kids here. And by that, I also mean your special education population. And looking at how we create programs, how we create opportunities for co-teaching, and how we support initiatives to really make sure that all of Danvers students stay here, that they don't look to be unilaterally placed or look for an out-of-district placement or things along those lines, that we're creating opportunities for our students to be educated with their peers, which is proven by evidence and research to be the best way for students to learn. I think also making sure that you're having conversations and exit interviews, and I know about the survey data of students looking to go elsewhere. Well, how are we converting that survey data to keep our students here? How are we making sure that we're having those conversations to maintain them? I actually have experience working to keep students in a school district as opposed to going to other schools by building, and I'll just go quickly on the side, by building a program of bringing 8th graders to the high school for a full day orientation, giving them a t-shirt, building them up for pride, giving them free tickets to all athletic events and all drama events, which gets a little challenging because drama is usually self-funding, so you got to find money to support the drama program there. But making sure that you're giving kids a real sense of what their schools can do by having your athletes, your theater students, by having your DECA students go to the middle schools and sell their great high school, and making sure that parents know what is available to them. So those are some of the metrics. I would also say looking at assessment data. All right, looking at our teacher data and Teach Point, looking at various data points to build a comprehensive picture of where students are. I would look to build a data team to really make sure that we're looking at the various points of data that our students are doing from ST Math. All right, MCAS is a one and done. All right, by the time you analyze that data, it's really a postmortem. So what are the internal assessment systems, homegrown or otherwise, that we can use to really inform our practice, build on our strategic plans, and really change where we're moving from? To really get to what would I change or improve to make Danvers a top-tier school district, despite all the research that I've done and the visit today, what I would need to do is I would need to bring together a team of individuals. I would need to get the right people around the table to have these conversations, for us to have a comprehensive look. I, as a leader, could not do this work alone. I would need to bring in members of the school committee, members of the community, members of the teaching staff, members of our instructional aides, parents, students, to understand like what needs to be changed and what needs to be improved and what should never be changed, because that's part of who we are. I'm a firm believer, though, that we need to really take comprehensive looks at what we're doing in education, and we need to have the right people around the table. And by the right people, I mean an inclusive group of people who really can understand and take a comprehensive look at district systems and structures and make sure that they are functioning for the best interests of our students, to make sure that they're functioning for the best interests of our educators. And then by there, you're able to build a larger Danvers community that really builds on and believes in their schools in a passionate way.
Thank you. So Robin, you are up next.
So this is a little bit wordy, but I know you have it in front of you. So how do you keep your committee informed? In particular, what is your strategy around issues that are your responsibility, but where the school committee may have an interest? What has been their response and feedback?
So I actually have really extensive experience in this. We have a really invested school committee in Medford right now, and I was very fortunate at Narragansett to have a school committee with some people who'd been on the committee for 30 to 40 years. Wow. And some are still serving on that committee. And I firmly believe that even though the issues may be my responsibility, the reality is that your parents, your community members, you're more than just school committee members. And why is that important? Well, because when constituents come to you, you should be well informed of what's going on. So I believe in giving phone calls and confidential email updates to the school committee. I believe that my phone should always be on for you and to be able to have conversations. And, you know, it may be a text message to the group or to the individual, because we don't want to violate open meeting law, but it would be a text message to the individuals to say, hey, we need to have a quick conversation. I want to make you aware of something. I believe that an aware school committee is a really well-informed school committee who can help us along the way. And they may have suggestions, even though it's not necessarily the operations of the school and may stray outside of governance. But I believe that by having these conversations, we're going to be able to build a really strong feedback moving forward. And in my experience, this will be the short part of this answer, the response and the feedback has been really positive. They enjoy being informed, they enjoy knowing, and they definitely don't like being surprised. And nor should they be.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, I'm next. What role do you think the public schools have in addressing the increasing mental health issues among young people? And what ideas do you have to address these issues? By context, we all know that even before the pandemic, these issues were becoming increasingly apparent. And certainly since the pandemic and the school closures, it's a tremendous area of concern for a lot of us.
Yes, Mr. Crane, thank you for the question. I really appreciate it, because this is definitely a problem. Robin and Alice were at the first interview, and they got to hear me speak about this. And just quickly, I'd like to say that my amazing wife is a licensed clinical social worker, an LICSW, and worked in schools for a long time. And so I've been able to see this not only as a school principal, as an assistant principal, as a district leader. I've been able to see this mental health crisis at the forefront, even at home. And I really believe that kids cannot learn if their Maslow's hierarchy needs are not being met at the base levels. And we have to make sure that we are providing our students with the appropriate supports to really address the mental health issues that they're facing. As I said in my previous interview, for those of you who weren't there, I firmly believe that cell phones, social media, and the unfettered access for many of our youth is contributing in a deleterious manner that cannot be understated. I believe that schools and districts have a responsibility to bring in speakers or to train staff to speak to parents about the unfettered access that these devices are causing problems when it comes to bullying, when it comes to seeing things online that they shouldn't see at a young age, and when it comes to interacting with people that they probably should never interact with at any age. And, you know, cell phones aren't the ultimate evil. Since I started in educational leadership in 2008, I've been a firm believer that adjustment counselors are a core of who we are. I have, as a leader, faced several students' passings directly connected to the mental health crisis. And when you lose a student, it changes you, and it makes sure that you are addressing things differently. And, you know, as an interim principal, I had to make a very difficult decision to move on from a very long-term educator because I needed to shift the model from guidance at a middle school to hiring clinical social workers. And, you know, despite unfortunately only being a few years away from retirement, the need presented itself to make sure that we were providing the supports for our students. That specifically, how were we providing our students what they needed? The ideas that I have to really address this issue, and so what role do schools have? I want to get direct there. We are not mental health organizations, but we have to provide triage services to make sure that we are supporting students and hopefully getting them to where they need to be. There are now 25 centers across the Commonwealth that have been opened, and if I could look at my Twitter, I could give you the phone number, but that you can call and get mental health services. I encourage people to seek that out in this behavioral mental health crisis that we are in. So schools have a responsibility to make sure that we're training our students and educating them on how to act appropriately, on how to access their skills, on how to really problem solve through a mental health crisis that they may be facing. To realize like there are various coping skills and strategies that we can teach to students through morning meeting, all right, through, I just had a brain blank. I apologize. I'll come back to it. But to really be able to address those. One of the best things that I've seen is training staff in mental health CPR. That's a 3 half-day situation. And then there's a book published by Rebus Associates that is endorsed by Castle on social emotional learning in the classroom is the title. And doing book studies on those books and other books like them is really part and parcel to making sure that we're training our staff to be able to triage before even the school social workers and other clinicians in the building can really support them.
Thank you.
Zones of regulation, that's what I wanted. Zones of
Yes,
regulation
yes.
for our elementary students. Sorry, it was on the tip of my tongue, but really making sure that we're engaging with zones of regulation. And then one piece of work that I've done in both Medford and really dove off the high dive into this and did as a principal at Narragansett was bringing restorative practices, restorative circles, restorative chats to schools to be able to really work on that. And as a teacher leader, I led the peer mediation efforts at Arlington High School. And I believe that those types of programs where you bring in peer mediators and you make students leaders, you're able to help diffuse situations and you're able to help students work through problems with their peers.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Gabe, you are up.
All right. Describe a time when you faced a D&I issue at your school. What was the issue and how did you address it?
So as a principal, one of the things that I faced was when I first entered as a high school principal, we were on notice to participate with DESE in the Rethinking Student Discipline modules because we had disproportionality and exceptionally high suspension rates. And those suspension rates were of students of color. And when you have black and brown students being suspended being suspended in a disproportional manner, what you're doing is you're restricting their access to education. And you're further putting students who may already be in a disadvantaged state because they may not have had the best supports or the best education or those types of situations. What we really needed to do was we needed to look at our handbook, which basically, for some reason, completely circumvented the due process rights of students. And for situations like vaping, were listed as automatic suspensions for 2 days. So if a student vapes, we would send them home to vape more at home, as opposed to being in school, getting counseling, getting their education, being supported by a community that cares about them. And not that their home doesn't care about them, but the school should be their true safety net. It should be the place where when they walk in the door, they feel warm, they feel supported. And so that was a true issue of the diversity piece was that we were targeting a diverse population implicitly. Like there wasn't a way out of this. There was no equity in the issue because it was a blanket, this is what it's going to be. And instead of including students, we were excluding them. So what we did was we made, and it was very difficult for staff, I'll be honest, but we made a decisive decision, myself and assistant principal, to change that in the handbook and bring it before school committee and start the year without that in practice. And we were able to start to quickly reduce suspensions because what that did was it automatically, just on the issue of vaping as an example, it automatically put you in an argument with students that could then escalate and then, well, now you're insubordinate, so we're going to have another day. And then a student's out for 3 days. And so it really makes sure that you look at the structural inequities and the systemic problems that foster and continue to cause these issues. If I can, I'll add another DEI issue at our school is, we've been doing a lot of work on professional development for faculty and staff to make sure that they are well-informed about how important the DEI work that we're doing is, and to make sure that it's a sense of belonging. And we partnered with some outside organizations, and we're doing large 500, 600 plus Zooms at the height of the pandemic, which, in case you know anything about adult professional learning, might be the absolute worst way to do any type of learning, especially around DEI. And when we were doing this in Medford, the reason why we started this work was after the George Floyd murder, we had a number of students come forward and say, we've faced issues, all right, in our past. We want them addressed. We established a race equity task force. We started using that task force to look at the professional development that we needed to offer. We did an equity audit of our human resources department to start, and we'll continue that work. We have partnered with TNTP through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's Teacher Workforce Diversification Program and the monthly webinars that they have. This is our second year participating in that because I really want to have a robust cohort of people trained to be able to understand how we're going to recruit a diverse workforce to work with our students. And then finally, that professional development that I initially mentioned, well, what we did was we realized that what we did initially didn't work. So we went back to the drawing board, and instead of bringing people from the outside, myself and other members of the senior leadership team and other members of the of the district leadership team across the district, we have about 40 district administrators in Medford. We sat down and we figured out, how are we going to deliver for the November 8th Professional Development Day, a professional development that inspires people, that makes them feel fulfilled, and really opens the door to conversations. We created a multimedia presentation that included videos, reading case studies, and really looking at the work that we had to do. And we were able to we got amazing positive feedback because we took those 40 administrators, paired everybody up, created 20 groups across the district, and we're able to take our staff of about 550 to 600 participating in that day, and we were able to break them up into groups of fewer than 20 people or so. And we were able to go and have conversations with them one-on-one. We were able to build trust. We were able to work through the issues on these very challenging topics, but it started by doing the work and walking the walk. And I'm a firm believer that I'm someone who has the agency and the ability to help lead this work because of who I am, where I've been, and the ability to identify problems where they are and to bring people together to help collaboratively solve them. Now, I just want to say that work around DEI is complex. But just because it's complex, we can't shy away from it, and we must embrace it, and we must do it because it's for the greater good of our students in our school district.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alice?
Thank you. Tell us about a time you have faced conflict within your district or school. Take us through how you dealt with it and what you learned.
Thank you, Alice, for the question. I really appreciate it. I'll say this much. My first year being a principal was an interesting year. As I've shared the story with others, I was a high school principal, and my first day ever working in schools, I had worked as a marketing director for an internet company. In 2000, the internet world really kind of fell apart. And my father, God rest his soul, he came downstairs one day. He's like, "You're not just sitting on the couch. You're going to sign up to sub, or you're finding a job." And that really started my educational life. Education was the family business. My mother's a teacher, aunts, uncles. One of my uncles is a principal in a neighboring district. And why do I share that? Well, because the superintendent non-renewed the middle school principal. And my only experience in middle school was working as a substitute for one day at a middle school in Lynn. And I walked out of there being like, wow, those kids have a lot of energy, and feeling like I'm never going back to middle school. And then one day, the superintendent non-renewed the beloved and well-respected principal of the middle school. And her next stop was to walk down the hall and see me. And what I didn't know was that her conversation with the staff had been, the elementary schools are here, the high school's here, and there's a dip in the middle. And so she was assigning the high school assistant principal, who had never had any experience in middle school, to lead them. And so there was natural conflict there. There was a natural lack of trust that I knew what I was doing, that who are you to tell us how a middle school should run? And in reality, I didn't tell people. What I did was I listened. I listened to hear what they had to say. I listened to what their problems were. I was clear that that year as an interim, I wanted to make sure that we became a model for other middle schools across the state, that we sent out teams across the Commonwealth to other 5 through 8 middle schools, one of which was Linfield Middle School. All right, to go and find and data mine them for their best practices, to understand what they were doing that we could do, even though we were a poor rural school district. What could we do? And I only went on one of the visits. All right, I only went on one because I didn't want to dominate the conversation. I wanted people to come back and bring me the ideas and then have us sit around a table and have conversations. And those conversations over about a 2.5-year period led, as I said earlier, to us becoming one of only 2 level 1 middle schools in all of Worcester County. It was because of the power of the team. and by listening. And I made a lot of mistakes that year. All right, I faced challenges. I faced 5 specific challenges that year, all right, that I spoke to other principals about, and they were like, I've been doing this job for 15 or 20 years, and I've never had to face one of those. And some of those I addressed earlier in this meeting. But the reality is that I made mistakes, and I own those mistakes. I listened to the staff. I created a community by working together with others to really build a sense of like, we can do it. And then I'll be honest, I also created a marketing and communications plan that rebranded the school, moved away from a Native American warrior head to an inclusive symbol, created a chant, it's a great day to be and then the students would fill in warrior, all right? Like really built that in to the point where even now, a few years later, I still get video text messages from my old staff when the kids do, it's a great day to be a warrior, and saying like, it still lives. And I think that like, when you face conflict, oftentimes our first response might be to be defensive. Our first response might be to be reactive. And I think what you might need to do is you might need to listen. You might need to pause, and you might need to get a greater understanding of what the conflict actually is before you storm back in.
Thank you. Josh, you're up.
Yep, thank you. So, Peter, can you describe a specific time where you had to challenge the status quo and make a change? What was the situation? What steps did you take in order to make the change?
I'm going to go back. I'm going to give you 2 examples. All right. When I first arrived at Narragansett Regional High School, we had 2 advanced placement courses with 13 enrollments, and over the previous 5 years, no qualifying scores for the AP program, if you could call it an AP program. Now, what was sad was that the English and the math teachers were both the heads of the department, and they were really skilled educators. They really were. But they'd never really received any professional development other than whatever the AP training was. They'd never really received any support. And the status quo belief was that was by some educators, who, by the way, if they're listening to this, their thinking has changed, was that our kids can't do this. Our rural poor kids, come on, Peter, they can't do this. And I challenged that head on. I built some followership. I believe that leaders can't lead without followership. I built followership with the head of our English department and another teacher as well. And they helped me write a grant for the Massachusetts Math and Science Initiative, AP, which was controversial at the time because it provided incentives for teachers. I was able to partner with our union to work through that issue. I was able to get people to buy in to going to the professional development, a week-long institute at Brandeis University in Waltham and Bentley. I think they also did Bentley, to really get world-class professional development. We increased our advanced placement program from 2 courses to 8, and in a school of about 480 kids, that's a lot. We went from 13 enrollments with no qualifying scores to about 180 enrollments, if I'm remembering correctly, with amazing qualifying scores. Our percentages were off the charts for MIMSI. They loved our data. And I think one of the best tells of this story is, to change the status quo, was we went from 0 qualifying scores in AP Calculus, all right, with very few kids wanting to take that course, to getting teachers trained, providing Saturday sessions for students, okay, for them to get intensive coaching around the AP program, and then by expanding, and I'll get into one other piece in a second, to getting 15 students in AP Calculus 3 years, if I remember correctly, 3 years after we started the program. 15 students not just getting qualifying scores, but all 15 getting 5s. Okay? That's the power of changing the status quo. And one of the other ways we did that was we also paid for every single student in the sophomore and junior class to take the PSAT. And then what that does is gives you access to a tool called AP Potential. And then working with my guidance staff, we developed a form to bring those kids in and have conversations around the courses that they hit, and we lowered the bar. So they set a little bit of an artificially high bar in AP Potential, and we lowered it 1 standard deviation so that we actually had a bigger net to catch kids. And we brought all of those kids in. We had individual conversations with them, and we built relationships with those students to bring them on board and change that status quo. The other one, they were now flooding me. I'll give you one more, was when, similar to the AP program, we added AP Physics. And the physics teacher was like, there's no way they can take this without taking a prerequisite. Absolutely not. And I was able to convince him to go out and talk to other teachers in other schools about, no, the students can come in and take the AP Physics without having to take a prerequisite. What it would have done is it would have actually shuttered out so many students from taking it, because unfortunately, a lot of high school schedules with Mass Core are really locked up, and there aren't great opportunities for students to take passion courses that they might love. So I hope that effectively answered the question. Thank you, Josh, for that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Robin?
Okay. So how would you hold educators at all levels accountable for delivering effective instruction?
Thank you very much for this question, Dr. Doherty. I think this is a really great question, because everybody wants to talk about accountability and high accountability, and how are we holding people responsible and accountable for what our students should be learning. And I'm a firm believer that you cannot have high accountability without high support. That as a leader, I am someone who believes in being in classrooms. As I've said to many people today, even though I'm the assistant superintendent, I still supervise and evaluate members of the teaching corps, because the further you get from a class, the easier it is to start doing things that forget about keeping one of my other core values, the sacred and sanctity of the classroom, making sure that we're shielding teachers from the noise of state, federal, and maybe even district mandates, and making sure that we're being well thought out in what we're doing. And so first, I believe it's a high level of support, making sure that we're providing great professional development for our teachers, making sure that we're providing them the resources. When I first got to Medford and powered up my computer, it booted to Windows 7 3 months before Windows 7 was sunsetting. And I thought it was just because, oh, we made a makeshift office until his is ready. Okay, and I checked into it, and on my first day, there was a red light flashing in my brain, because that was the mainline computer for all of our educational staff. And some had Chromebooks, but I don't believe it's respectful to give educators Chromebooks. All right, I believe that they need to be given world-class devices to support what they're doing in the classroom. If we're going to ask them to do things for our kids, we need to do like Jim Sullivan is doing here in Danvers, and providing them the touchscreen interactive boards, by providing them the MacBooks, by providing them those types of things. And in 2 districts, I've provided people in Narragansett and in Medford through an amazing, the COVID, I guess if there's any plus to it, was the windfall of cash. We were able to, in one fell swoop, hand out a MacBook to every single teacher in the Medford Public Schools. So about 480 MacBooks. You know what a MacBook costs. That's some pretty quickly adding up math. And in a poor rural school district that had never given teachers anything, all right, we were able to roll in world-class devices for them to use. And so for delivering effective instruction, I believe that we also have to make sure that we're in classrooms. We need to be not there as an I got you, but as I'm a here for you, by providing them handwritten notes that are not just about formal observations, about informal observations, by making sure that we're supporting them when they may be struggling, by being human and offering them humanity instead of insensitivity, and by having conversations about why their practice may have slipped, or what resources they might need, or what professional development can we as a district provide to them as an individual. As I said in my previous interview, I really believe in the CJEIR method of very clear feedback. I believe in giving that feedback to teachers in a very balanced manner that really accentuates the positives and doesn't overwhelm them with negatives. I believe that if we do have to move teachers to improvement plans or directed growth plans, we have an obligation to provide them with status check-ins in between formative assessments, and we have an obligation to not only say that they need to change or say they need to improve, we have to provide them the resources, the books, the support from teacher peers, from teacher leaders, from administrators, or outside professional development to really help them to grow. And the amazing thing about this is the overwhelming majority of teachers do improve. And so I think that's a really critical thing, is making sure that you're in there. So first, how are you going to hold teachers accountable? You first have to provide a high level of support. If you don't provide support, how can you expect accountability? And number two, you have to be present in classrooms, in spaces. And I want to take accountability just further. When I was a principal, I would say I was at between 85 and 80% of student events. All right? Students knew that I had a standard that I expected, because if I heard language or saw behavior, I would call them in to have a conversation about it. I wouldn't call them out, I wouldn't embarrass them, all right, but I would call them in. I would announce field hockey. I actually announced everything except for football, because that was a sacred area for one individual. But I would announce games. I would make sure that it felt like a college or a pro atmosphere. And by being present, you can address issues. By being there, you can see what's going on, and if something's going south, you can quickly help to turn it north, and you can make the situation better. So I believe in accountability by being present as well.
Thank you.
All right. I am next. In terms of building a budget and working to develop a budget, how do you work with your staff and with the school committee and advise everybody who's involved, all the stakeholders, regarding budget priorities during, what can be difficult times from a financial standpoint? And we've all seen ups and downs over the years. Sometimes everyone's flush, other times it gets difficult. And right now we're in kind of an inflationary environment. So how do you go about building a budget and working with the stakeholders?
Yeah. Mr. Crane, thank you very much for that question. And I will say that I've been involved in more down years than up years. When the Great Recession hit in 2008, most people don't realize this. I grew up in, most people don't realize that outside of the 495 belt in north central Massachusetts, all right, people were in 2009 like the recession's over. Well, as someone who grew up in Lynn, all right, came of age on Boston's North Shore, went to college in New Hampshire, I had a blind spot and didn't understand what rural, poor Massachusetts faces. And when in 2009 the recession was over, we really didn't see an economic turnaround until about 2015. Okay? We did not see good, and I don't even call them good times, but we were forced to make draconian cuts in a way that once at a Massachusetts School Administrators Association meeting with the late Mitchell Chester, and he was taking questions, I stood up and I asked, you said that we need to cut through the fat, you need to cut through the flesh. Well, we're cutting into the bone right now in some parts of Massachusetts. We're eliminating critical services for students. I don't think that you can build a budget without having a strategic plan or a well-vetted school improvement plan that has been run through a site council, that has been run through faculty and staff scrutiny, that has been shared publicly, and that those elements of your strategic plan, all right, match your district's core values. And in advising staff, I advise my staff to give me priority listed budgets that if I need to make cuts, all right, when summer hits or budgets don't pass or there are problems, that I am well informed to go from the bottom up as opposed to just randomly cutting. That I've always believed that, and this started as a middle school principal, all right, the staff had never been talked to about budgets. And I started bringing them in a departmental sense, all right, to understand what their needs were, and created some Google Forms around budgeting that they could then input their data, give rationales, show how it was connected to a school improvement plan, and then be able to move forward with budgeting. And I think also advising a school committee is making sure that we are doing presentations, as I have seen through your school committee meetings, where almost everything is connected back to the strategic plan and those 3 pillars. And I think that that is fundamentally critical and is a great asset that Danvers has done that work. And making sure that as we're going through the budget, we explain where fiscal cliffs might be. This free money has been wonderful, but it's going to make for some tough decisions for many school districts along the way. And so we've tried to avoid paying for personnel But right now, we have definitely purchased some engagement specialists and some hall monitors and some other things like that that are going to be difficult, to fund moving forward with what's on the horizon, and the federal dollars going away. But I think that budget priorities have to be informed by strategic priorities. And your strategic priorities, and I don't remember if I said this during my first interview, but culture eats strategy for breakfast. Your strategic priorities have to be built on a strong school culture or a developing school culture. Because when you're making tough decisions, if you don't have a good culture going to a great culture, it's going to be very difficult to argue in perilous times.
Thank you.
Yep.
We are back to Gabe.
How would you manage staffing in the face of changing demographic needs, specifically enrollment decline at the high school and increasing enrollment in new classroom space at the elementary level?
Mr. Lopes, I really want to thank you for this question. And had I not gone on the tour today, I would not have really understood the space crunch, especially at the Riverside School. And so I appreciate this question because this is definitely a sensitive topic. And I know that through the Student Opportunity Act funds, you've been able to, through this year, support positions that may have to be in the future eliminated because of a population decline at Danvers High School. All right. The reality is, though, is that going back to an earlier question, the reality is that the mental health crisis needs more adults. It needs more people connecting with kids. It needs more people who can build relationships with students. And so that's going to lead to some really difficult conversations if we have to cut staff overall in a district because of declining enrollment and declining funds. And that's going to really lead to some tension spots. I think that one of the things is that we need to buoy the high school. We need to make sure that we're creating programs. One of the programs that I helped create at the middle high school that I worked at was an outdoor leadership program. That was, we purchased canoes and military grade cold gear and tents and a bus and installed a challenge course. And so students would actually have an outdoor leadership program that culminated over Martin Luther King weekend by living in a challenge by choice fashion in Lake Denison State Forest. And there were some times where it was 0 degrees, but our kids were out there. They were well supported. It was great to go visit them in the woods and to provide programs for students. What Chapter 74 programs can we look at, all right, that are not offered locally to entice students to come here? What recruiting efforts can we do to make sure that our students never want to look anywhere else? So that's one way to address enrollment decline at the high school. Also, with 150 units coming online in downtown, we're going to have greater stress on our elementary schools. And so we may have to look at the flex zones and shifting lines, which I know is a potential third rail topic for a lot of people. But having Title I teachers in hallways teaching kids elements of reading and the science of reading is very distracting. This person would have been looking at everybody running up and down that hallway, or everybody walking in between class, or who's the guy in the blue suit and the red tie, and not paying attention to his reading instruction. And what I really think is that we're going to have to look at some shifts across the district to where there is open classroom space, and what building projects are we looking at in the next, say, 5 years. And we can't necessarily rely on state authorities to support those because the renovations have been paused. Funding is not there because those inflationary costs that you alluded to in the previous question, Mr. Crane, really are causing a problem for many school districts across the state that right now are in the midst of construction programs. So How would I manage staffing? Sometimes we're going to have to make those tough decisions that staffing might need to be shifted to other buildings, or staffing may have to be temporarily reduced to bring it back. But as I said earlier in the answer, we don't want to do that because we need more adults connecting with kids. I would also say, having faced this, you want to make your cuts as far away from the classroom as possible. You want to make sure that students are the last thing being affected by budget cuts. And, finding efficiencies and finding things. What revenue generating programs can the school district create? And there are many districts across the state that have done this. What revenue generating programs can we create to help support our budget, not supplant, help support our budget initiatives? And finally, going back to the classroom space, I think it's looking at shifting where students are and really taking a hard look at how can we expand classroom space, or how can we really revamp some of our elementary schools to really look at, okay, what are the needs moving forward? And I think the Smith School is a model for an absolutely amazing elementary structure. Like, seeing the authentic learning in just about a 45-minute to an hour visit there today, seeing kids being able to, as I mentioned earlier, partner with one another in the hallways, being excited about the centers that they were doing in their math classes. Some kids doing ST math, some kids doing manipulatives, some kids one-on-one with, not one-on-one, small group with their teacher, all right, around a kidney table. Like, those types of things that I saw at Riverside as well, all right? Those are the types of things that we cannot let physical space stand in the way of great teaching, and provide the resources for those educators.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe that is our last question. Are there any follow-up questions that are burning with anyone they want to ask?
Nope.
No, I presume not. I had, if you
You
guys
didn't
will,
like my word perilous? You didn't use
I'm
it.
sorry,
You
what?
didn't like my word perilous. You never used it.
I
I'm kidding, I'm
challenging.
kidding. I know, but then Peter used it, so.
It was very descriptive. I
There
loved
you
it.
go. Chairman's prerogative. I would like to ask one quick question, if I could, probably. I think it'll be a quick question, but maybe not. Crisis management.
Yes.
You know what we've been through. If you read the papers at all, people know what this district went through over the last few years, and even before that, unfortunately. We've had some events that could definitely be called crises. And I know in the recent weeks, I think it's fair to say you've been through that too with Medford. Just wondering how your approach to crisis management from a superintendent standpoint.
Yeah. So I learned crisis management from my school resource officers. This was definitely something that I did not know. And my school resource officers that I've worked with, 3 in particular, have been amazing educators. They partnered with students. They were coaches. They had one-on-one conversations. That's just an aside, all right? But they were such integral parts of the school community. And I know that's not the case everywhere. And I know that there are a lot of people who rightfully so at times bristle against law enforcement in schools. But in my experience, I have seen some absolutely amazing school resource officers who are educators and are a true resource. And one of the things I learned about in crisis management is, the first thing is, as the leader, you need to remain calm. Okay, you need to have your head about you, and you need to not rush in. And just as one example, I'll never forget the first thing that I responded to as an assistant principal. I forget what it was, but a call came over the radio, and I ran to the situation. And my principal and my school resource officer, I could basically see them smiling as I rounded the corner, all right? And they were smiling because you never run into a crisis. All right, you walk, you be deliberate, and you be thoughtful. And the other thing is you do have to provide timely information. In a crisis, you need to be transparent. And if you can't be transparent, you need to say to the parents and constituents, we can't tell you right now, but when we can, we will tell you. And say, like, everybody's okay. We're investigating, we're going through the process, we're going through the steps. Make sure that your social media accounts, that your Connect Ed messages, and your other things have pre-canned messages that can be quickly tweaked and be ready to go. And that as the leader, as the superintendent, if you're willing to delegate to a principal, as the leader of the building, who parents probably feel most comfortable with, make sure that you're coaching them on how to respond and be right there with them. Or as the superintendent, you step into the light and do what you need to do and provide the information for the district and for the school. And I believe that I'll build relationships in Danvers that will build for years to come. I believe that I will be connected with the community in a way that you may be surprised at, because I believe that this is a vocation. I believe that this is a calling. And I firmly believe in that work, in using those types of words. I have an obligation to commit myself to this work, and when crisis hits, to be able to stand up there and accept the responsibility, or to say, we're going to fix, grow, and move on, because we have great educators. I will also say that the situations that Danvers has been in and other districts, they are moments in time, and they don't define a district forever. And what you do is you implement the work that Mary Wormers has done. You implement the work that the athletic department has done. You have a principal like Mr. Federico that I've seen stand up and defend a great high school on your school committee meetings. All right? You establish communication with people so that they believe in your district and that you're going to improve, you're going to get better, and we're not going to forget this, but we're going to move forward. We're going to move forward, and we will be better. We will be in advance. And I will be honest with you, I have used those articles and those letters and the trainings from the Attorney General that I went to at the TD Garden to shape my practice in Medford in helping to lead our athletics department. I have anti-bias paperwork, trainings for coaches. We're implementing a captain's leadership academy and want to implement an overall leadership academy for our students to really build that muscle in our students. So that's a long answer, and I apologize.
That's okay. No.
It's really fundamentally critical and important that we lead this work and we learn from the issues that other schools have gone from. If we think for a second that these issues are isolated to a few high schools or a few middle schools or a few elementary schools, you're sorely mistaken. Many schools are facing these issues on a daily basis, and it's how we respond that is going to really help define us moving forward. And I think that definition for Danvers moving forward is going to be one of greatness, because I've seen you embracing the challenges and moving forward. And it's also bringing in students like Reese and Lily, who I saw them in September, bring up their issues. And it's making sure that those conversations are going on, making sure that there are superintendent advisory councils, making sure that students are involved. So when crisis hits, when you say something, people believe it. People believe you because you've never given them any reason not to believe you. So
Good.
Thank you, and I'm sorry for...
No, that's okay. So it's time for a closing statement. So I would like to invite you to tell us anything else that you think we need to know.
First, I want to take a moment to really thank you, the committee. I want to thank all the members of the initial screening committee. I want to take a moment to thank the faculty and staff who took time out of their afternoon to come to the afternoon session, to the parent from the Highland School, to the Highland Towns who came to visit with me today, to the members of this audience who are taking time out of your evening. It really shows an investment. It shows an investment in your school district. It shows a duty to care and a duty to cherish. I am really excited for this opportunity. I really believe that my skills, cultivated through my Boston College work, in my master's and doctoral program. My working in a small district where principals were a true part of a central office staff, where I was heavily involved in budgets and munis and like nuts and bolts of running a district, that I've cultivated myself to a point through working with a lot of other people, through building teams, and a true collaborative effort. To any educators out there at Narragansett, Webster, and Medford, like I owe them a debt of gratitude for how they've helped me to become the leader that I am. I couldn't have done it without them. You don't make change alone. You make change as a part of a team. And I've been able to be a part of great change. And I hope it's me to help lead this district moving forward. But I want to wish you the absolute best in your deliberations and your search moving forward. And I really thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you. It's been extremely interesting listening to you, and your passion, I think, is evident in what you do. And so we really appreciate the insights that you shared, the experiences you shared, and your interest in working with us. I think we really do appreciate you.
Thank you.
So, anything else before we, I think what we'll do is let's take a 5-minute break. We'll let Dr. Cushing head on his way. I will take a minute to personally thank him for being here. And
you.
then we'll come right back. We'll sit down and talk about the process a little bit.
Okay,
Sounds good.
Sound good?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right, so during the break, Dorothy Presser from the Mass Association of School Committees indicated, and she's been very helpful to us, so we can't thank you enough for the help you've given us. We appreciate it. And she's going to provide us with some information about how the voting process could go. And we'll consider that tonight and then chat about that after our interview tomorrow. And then we can let the public know exactly how that'll play out and how we'll vote. So I want to thank everybody tonight for the thoughtful questions. Hopefully we're going to have, I can tell just by looking at the paperwork, we've got some really good candidates here. And I feel very confident about this process. Robin and Alice, thank you for pulling things together. And Gabe and Josh, thank you for, along with me, trying to figure out the right questions to ask. And so thank you all. And with that, does anyone else have anything to say before a motion to adjourn?
So after tomorrow's interview then, can we live stream just how we're going to vote? Is that a possibility? Or no? Okay.
I suspect that that's difficult only because
Okay.
DCAT,
Because we told them no.
yeah, right, exactly.
Okay. Well, they'll be published in the paper. They can ask us. Okay.
And we can, depending on how we can describe the process, we can put it on the
Right.
website, that sort of thing. We'll find a way to communicate it.
Okay.
All right, so do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Josh, you got tomorrow night's motion.
I will.
There you go.
I think it took
Thank you, everybody. Good night, Danvers.
Thank you.